labor studies isn't new at Simon Fraser. What's new is the commitment that was made to it. I remember sitting down with the Dean of Academia when we were beginning to negotiate to get the program set up. He took out a piece of paper and he looked across the table at me and he said, why would we bother with a labor studies program? We only have 3 people or 4 people that got minors. And I looked back across the table and I said, that's because there was no real program for them to take. Let's see what happens when we offer them something real. So the big difference came when Margaret Morgan and her husband Lefty, it started with Lefty and Margaret together, they built a relationship with the history department and with the university. And they made some donations of books and other materials to the university. And Lefty passed away and some other donations were made. And at one point, Margaret decided that she was going to give everything that she ever created to the university to do labor studies. I always find this funny when a multimillionaire gives $1 million, it's a headline story. But when a working person gives $2 million, it doesn't get a headline at all. They donated really the income that came from the house that they built from the ground up. And so when she was giving the money, we had a discussion about what should happen with the money there. And she said, well, I think they're going to put an endowment and use some of the money to sponsor things. And so I said, okay, is that what you want? She says, well, I don't really know what I want. What I want is I want working people to be respected on the campus. I don't feel like working people are respected on that campus. Now, she has her MA, she's been to university, she was a principal, so she understands that world from a place as a working person, because she started off as a working person and ended her life as a working person. But she wanted respect. And what I did was I went around and talked to a number of professors and said, if you were going to get respect at the university, how would you do that for working people in a labor program? And they said the obvious thing, which hadn't been said, you'd have a program. You give degrees. That's what universities do. They give degrees. And so we said to the university, we want a degree granting program. And of course, they wanted nothing to do with us. And so it became also complicated because if we took the money and estimated $2 million and made an endowment, it might give us $50,000 a year to play with, upwards of 100 on a good day. But that wouldn't work because that wouldn't sponsor a program. And so we went and said, we'll put half the money in. We'll use half of our money, half of your money, and we'll start a program, a degree granting program. And they wouldn't put any more money in. So this became a series of negotiations over 3 years, by the way. It took 3 years to give them $2 million. And so we negotiated over many years an agreement that set up the program. And the second part, and which is why we now have a full-time professor in Kendra, was that we didn't give the second house donation unless they agreed to a full-time faculty member. She came to me and said, Jim, and this was the beginning of August, she said, on Labor Day, if we aren't signing papers, I'm taking my money back. And that was when, so I went to the university and I said, okay, we've bounced around on this for a long time. We need to fix this because I'm telling you now the money's going to go away. We sat down and we negotiated the final parts of the deal, including the guarantee for the teacher, for the professor to be hired, right? And we negotiated that and finished that deal on Labor Day. And not long afterwards, Margaret had a stroke. And she was on her way to a meeting. And she had a stroke. She couldn't show up. People phoned, this is Margaret. And she was sitting in her rocking chair. She said, oh, I'm going to be fine. And people said, no, we're coming over there. So they went over there, and clearly she had a stroke. And they took her to the hospital, and we all went to the hospital the next day to see her. And 3 days later, she died. And I was surprised she died. They thought she was dying, and then she could talk. And she kicked us out of the room and said, get lost. And I didn't realize all the dynamics around the time, but Margaret's husband had a terrible death over a very long period of time. That was very hard on Margaret, and she wanted nothing to do with that kind of death. And so I think in a way, in her own cold determination that she had about her life, she decided it was time and it was over. And during that time, one of her friends came to me and said, we had lunch a couple weeks or 3 weeks ago, and it was after that had happened, after the final agreement had been in place, had been signed. And the woman said to me, she looked at me and she said, I only had one thing left to do before I finished what I wanted to do on this earth. and that was finishing this project and setting up this project. And she said, so we got it done, and shortly after that she died. She came to the first meeting, and at that first meeting she thanked us for our work and said to us, it's now your job. And that was the last time they saw her.